First tonight, WSAZ investigates weeks after a chemical spill in the Kanawha Valley that left hundreds of thousands of people without water. People are still not confident in their water safety.
Yeah, many of you told us you're concerned, so we took the testing into our own hands, hiring an independent lab to test the water in several locations around the Kanawha Valley. Tonight, we'll release our test results and go back to where we got the samples and hear from those people. Will they now drink the water? And we have live in our studios our Marshall University scientist to help analyze the results, and Dr. Rahul Gupta on the very latest health risks and the concerns with the water. Good evening, everyone. I'm Amanda Barron in Charleston.
And I'm Tim here in Huntington. We've had a lot of people contact us with the idea of getting a second opinion on the water. So we hired an independent lab to take samples from around the Kanawha Valley and the surrounding areas. We tested those samples for MCHM and nearly 50,000 other compounds. Dan Griffin has been sorting through the pages of this study with some pretty interesting results.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. We took samples from 4 different areas, including directly from the Elk River in Charleston, and those results were actually pretty clear. Our water seems to be okay, but let's break it down for you sample by sample.
Slowly, people are turning their faucets back on, but so many of you are still asking us the same question. Is the water really safe? So we decided to find out for ourselves. We worked with ALS Environmental in Charleston to pull 4 samples. In each case, we took 2 liters of water, and we opted for a more detailed test. Each sample was analyzed at 0.01 parts per million. Our first sample came from Sharon Spencer's kitchen faucet in the South Hills area of Charleston. That's where the water ban was lifted and placed again before finally being lifted for good.
It smells like licorice. It smells that strong licorice smell, and I did flush these pipes. I flushed all the pipes.
Results from this sample showed MCHM was not detected. It's not necessarily the case for all. Keep in mind, some schools in that area are now retesting for the chemical after recent tests showed higher levels of MCHM in their water. Again, our sample was clear. We took a second sample about 5 miles down the road at Sugar Pie Bakery in Charleston. This sample came from their kitchen's 3-bowl sink. The bakery co-owner, Gina Watts, flushed their system after their zone was lifted. But they soon got the licorice smell. That has since gone away. Still, they're using bottled water to stay open.
Even though we've been inspected by the health department, our water's been, they gave us the good to go, but it's still just, you don't really know. They don't know enough about the chemical, I don't think, to really tell people that they're safe.
Our results from this sample surprised workers there. Again, no MCHM was found. Our third sample came from Buffalo Tiger Mart in Buffalo. The gas station is in an area where a ban was lifted, put back in place, and lifted again.
Whenever they told us to flush it, it started to smell like it. And then whenever they put us back on it and then told us to flush it again, it smelled like it all through that part.
Our samples came from a sink that uses the same water line as fountain drinks and coffee. The results were what many had hoped for: no MCHM. We took our final sample directly from the Elk River, just up from Freedom Industries. The smell of licorice was still noticeable near the water, and DEP officials were working in the area. We tested this sample for 50,000 compounds. The results were astonishingly clear. No MCHM was detected, and the remaining compounds were also undetected. In fact, the lab worker described it as clean as a whistle.
Now, many of you may still be skeptical about these lab tests. Again, they were tests from an independent lab that we paid for. One of the biggest concerns we've heard is that remaining smell, and Tim, lab workers tell me that smell is because the MCHM chemical actually has a low odor threshold, which means just a little bit will make a very, very noticeable smell.
Very pungent, then,
yes,
in that case.
very, very noticeable.
A lot of people, Dan, may also ask the question, how we know, they wonder how we know that the tests actually work. Did they have other measures in place to make sure that maybe the results came out that way?
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Actually, what they did was they had separate versions of those tests where they would inject chemicals, and they would test for those chemicals. And as long as those showed up, they could tell that their process was working. And in each of the tests that they showed us, those chemicals actually showed up. And in about 4 minutes or so, we'll actually hear from those people who shared what they thought after we shared the results.
Almost like a placebo effect in the case of an independent lab study in that situation of a drug. Hey, thanks, Dan. And we should tell you that you can read the full results on WSAZ.com.
We had the latest results of a new water quality test released just hours ago from 116 schools. The West Virginia Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management says that all schools it's tested show no signs of MCHM in the water. In the last week, several schools in Kanawha, Putnam, and Lincoln counties were closed for reflushing after trace amounts of the chemical were detected. State officials say after the second round of flushing, no amounts of MCHM were found in the school water. We wanted to take these results to an expert in this field.
Yeah, WSAZ has been working with a man named Dr. Michael Castellani, who is the chairman of the Marshall University Chemistry Department. Since that spill happened, Dr. Castellani joins us right now. And, you know, the question on many people's minds is how can any of that chemical show up in anywhere along that line when you think about that plume is so far downstream right now? One answer would be a new source leaking. That would be in everyone's water, though, right?
Yeah, and presumably they've replaced all of the purification units, so a small addition should be cleaned out.
All right, but you have a different theory about how it may be there.
Yeah, when it permeated the entire system, almost certainly some of it got into some lines that weren't used, maybe a house where people had moved out, a business that had closed. And what happens is if the water pressure drops and people didn't flush those lines, you'd have some backflow into the system, and then it moves back and shows up. And that's
almost like a backwash would show up that way. So in that sense, that's why maybe somebody on one side of the street may not have a problem, but if the neighbor on another side of the street reflushes that line and then backwashes back in, and perhaps, and of course, again, you pointed out, it's a guess, it's a theory, but it makes sense because not everyone's water would be affected. A new source of a leak would infect everyone's water. Last night, I want to point this out before we go, you kind of ran a test of your own, and it gave you an appreciation for why people may feel anxious about drinking water.
Sure. I mean, you start off from the premise that this stuff shouldn't be in anybody's water. By this time, everybody is telling you that there is little to none of it present, and so there shouldn't be a significant risk. My wife and I were at a restaurant, and I ordered a glass of tap water. And 35 years of experience in the field, and I still looked at it, and it was the unknown that drove me a little crazy when I looked at it.
So you tested it?
Yeah.
Seemed to be okay today? Feeling okay?
Yeah. The water didn't have a taste, didn't have any ill effects, but you still wonder as you drink it.
Yeah, it does make people. It makes you appreciate it. Dr. Castellani, thanks a lot. We will definitely keep in touch with you. Thank you. You know, after we received our water test results, we went back to where we took the samples to hear from those people.
Yeah, and the question we had is, will you drink the water now? News Channel 3's Dan Griffin tells us that for some of them, this is really a step toward normalcy.
Turning on the tap is a sour subject for Sharon Spencer. Just a week ago, she tried her tap water and spit it right back out. She says the water tasted awful.
I still am optimistically cautious, and I have lots of bottled water to go through.
When we shared the test results, no MCHM, Spencer was hesitant to jump for joy.
It's showing that there are no levels now that we need to be concerned about, but at the same token, you know, I still don't know what's going on the rest of the county, those areas that haven't been tested, and also the long-term effects.
She says that's reason enough to wait.
I don't cook with it, nor do I drink it.
Spencer says that will be the case for a while.
I think that's what the public wants, is they want water that they are comfortable with using in their dishwasher, drinking, putting their hands in to scrub the floor.
That's right.
Showering, whatever, that they need to be sure.
Just down the road in Charleston, we shared our test results with the owners of Sugar Pie Bakery.
I'm so glad to hear that. We've been really worried about it, and we still have people that have been asking about it.
Co-owner Gina Watts says the crisis has hurt their business, but she says knowing MCHM was not detected in these tests means things may be able to change soon.
We'll kind of, I guess, poll our customers and see how they feel, if they would prefer us to keep doing what we're doing or if they want us to go ahead and continue as normal.
She says this crisis also provides perspective on being ready for the unknown.
Makes you want to be prepared for something like this. You know, you got to kind of plan ahead, and we do live in Chemical Valley. You never know what's going to happen.
In this case, she hopes the worst is over and the faucets in her bakery's kitchen can soon be used again. Dan Griffin, WSAZ News Channel 3, Charleston.
Once again, the lab that we hired for the testing is ALS Environmental in Charleston. And if you're interested, you can actually have your own water tested. We have the information on WSAZ.com.
Dr. Rahul Gupta, Health Officer and Executive Director at the Kanawha Charleston Health Department, joins me now. And Dr. Gupta, you heard our results. He said it's as clean as a whistle. Will you drink the water?
We are so ready to be getting this behind us and moving forward. And absolutely, I think it's important that to mention that I've tried to drink the water before. The first night, actually, I've tried to drink the water. It had a smell to it, aftertaste. I've tried multiple times in between, and I think there's a sense that people are trying to get back to normal. And of course, we're all getting to that point where we're all going to start to drink the water, hopefully soon.
One day at a time, one glass at a time. We heard the professor talk a little bit about the unknown, one unknown that's going to be with us for years, the long-term health effects. 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 10 years from now, what are you going to be looking for?
The most important thing at this time is actually to make sure that for the people who have consumed this chemical, even in small amounts, we know going forward that we don't end up in having any toxicological impact on our bodies. Now, it's important to understand also is that when we're testing, there are very minute amounts of detectable levels, or they're beyond detection at this point at 10 parts per billion. Sure. And obviously it's not zero, but it is a little bit. And as we drink, some of that, the good news is that now the half-life is about 14 days, so we're almost about 2 half-lives away. So you would imagine that this has to come to an end. At some point. But we also need to know that we need to make sure that we follow our folks for long periods of time to make sure there were no after or long-term impact.
I want to touch on women who are pregnant. Are you going to pay closer attention to women who may be delivering babies, say, in the next few weeks?
Oh, I think it's very important to make sure, because remember, if you go back, that there was a time period between when flushing and use was allowed and the pregnant woman advisory was issued. And we want to make sure that the people who were pregnant at that time and they drank the water, they're also captured into the system. And what we are doing now is working with our lawmakers to make sure that there are resources available to local health departments to be able to do this follow-up long term.
We have about 20 seconds left. We live in the Chemical Valley. What do we learn from this?
I think we have served as an example, and we will continue to serve as an example so that others can learn from us all across the nation and the world. Now, what we learn is no matter what happens, we always come out strong and stronger as West Virginians.
Well, I know it's been a long couple of weeks for you and so many other folks who are leading this charge. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us.
Thank you,
we do
Amanda.
appreciate it very much. All right, we want to continue to follow this for you, and we will continue to keep tabs and keep asking important questions as we move forward.
This chemical spill has shed light on problems of how companies like Freedom Industries are regulated. Just 6 minutes away, we are taking a closer look at some of the solutions proposed just today on Capitol Hill.
And meteorologically speaking, water is in the forecast tonight, mostly liquid, but some areas frozen in the form of sleet and freezing rain. Portsmouth, Ohio Weather Cam sponsored by West Virginia Lottery. Across the river into interior southern Ohio, possibility of some freezing rain conditions tonight. Updated forecast goes state to state with a pinpoint forecast when I come back on News Channel 3 at 6.